Hey, welcome back to the Myth Impressions channel, home of Steampunked Out, Nemesis Gear, and Knox Hollow Wood Shop. We are back in the leather shop today because I have been doing some posts recently on Facebook about some of the 3D printing that I've been doing for leather work, and I've got tons of amazing comments and lots of questions. I think the belt embossing wheels were kind of the big deal, but a lot of people have been asking me just about 3D printing in general. So I wanted to kind of share with you kind of where I started and kind of some of the things I've tried, and then I'll talk a little bit in detail about some of the dimensions and things that I found that work and what filaments and stuff like that. Since focus is a little bit of a problem, I'm going to go ahead and just focus like right down on the mat here so that I can have a static focal area, and that way you'll be able to see things a little bit better. So let's jump into this. We'll talk a little bit about the stamps and stuff, and then we'll also do some stamping as well. We'll jump in the other room where I got my press, and I'll show you how all that works. So let's get in here. Okay, so starting out, one of the first things I wanted to do, I was working on a product, and it was kind of a pain to do some of the shaping by hand. So I wanted to try to come up with a form that I could use. And so this is a two-piece form that I did, the two pieces to fit together, and it just basically raises on the backside and imprints on the front. And this is just, it's small, it's pretty simple. I think I was trying infill on this, probably around 70% or so, and they worked okay. These were ones I had, the leather was laser cut for me by the local print shop to do some testing. So I knew that the design that I had to start with, the laser cut was going to be exact and precise, so I was able to use that same drawing to digitize this and then come up with the forms from that. And I just, got the leather wet, popped this in here, and then a lot of you are using arbor presses for doing small stamps and stuff. I've had one for like 20-something years, and I just have a couple of flat plates, and then I just put this in, crank it down, and that worked pretty well. Just as my initial testing went, I knew that I could do some forming and stamping with it. So I moved on to designing some flat stamps that I could do. And, you can do a lot of people have stamps made and they're, this big. A lot of that has to do with the cost. It's very expensive to have that done. So, if you get a small one, you can put that one stamp design on multiple projects and stuff like that. But with 3D printing, you're not limited to that. So I started off with some bracers, and I just did some flat plate designs like this. And one of the first ones I did is I wanted a dragon scale pattern, so I printed those off on some bracer designs, and those worked really well. Working on some pouches. This is part of just a simple flask pouch that I did. So you can see that there's no fancy antiquing or anything done on this one. This is just finished. All I did was just dye it. And then, faded the edges to a black dye on the edges, So these go really quick to do when I do those. And then the pouch, this is one of the newer pouch designs I was working on. I made the scales a little bit smaller, and this is for the flap on the lid. This one I actually did some antiquing on, so you can really see how deep that design is in there and how that's working. It's working really well for the antiquing. So I went from being able to do these flat plate designs. I was wanting to be able to do a belt. So I did, this is the first test piece I did for a belt. And what I did is I just kind of tapered these edges off, and same process. I'm just using my arbor press for this. And I did a belt, and these are all perfectly aligned. So what I would do is I would just, press it and then move it, and then, make sure that it was perfectly lined up, and then press it again. And that took forever. So I just was really trying to figure out how to, do the belts a little bit better, and spent several weeks coming up with a design. And that, I think, is one of the things that made it real popular. Is I started doing the belt rollers. That I converted. I've got another video on that. You can check that out if you want, on how I did the belt rollers. But as you can see, I just took the design and put it on a circle for the roller, And you can get really pretty detailed on these designs. So so that's where I got to on those. And if you want to see what those are looking like, here's some belts that I pulled off recently. So this is all off this one design right here. So you can see, with the contrast and stuff in there, I'm getting a really nice impression on this, whether it's a flat stamp or with the belt roller. This is all working really well for me. So how I'm doing it, other people may do it differently. I'm just going to tell you how I'm doing it. My designs are set up for the belt rollers, the problem is they have to print it on their side. So that means that you end up with an overhang. So all of my impressions on these are about 1 millimeter deep, because I know that my printer will handle a 1 millimeter overhang without a problem and still stay nice and good clean design for the most part, excepting any fails. So those I'm printing 1 millimeter deep, but with the flat stamps, you can kind of fudge that a little. One of the things that I've found early on with some of my early plate designs, especially, is the thickness of the line that you're stamping in. I have found that you really, for the most part, don't want the depth of this line to be taller than it is wide. And you can kind of fudge that a little bit with the flat stamps if you have a little bit wider. For the most part though, if my line is about 1 millimeter tall, I try to make sure that it's at least 1 millimeter wide. So there is a little bit of limitation on how detailed you can get with your stamps. But you can kind of play around with that with doing some chamfered edges and stuff. So if you go in and chamfer the edge on the bottom edge on this so that the print comes out at an angle, I might do some illustrations here or something and just kind of overlay them. The thing that you want when you're printing this, I'm printing on a nozzle that's 0.4 millimeters wide. So if you're doing a 1 millimeter wide line, then you're gonna get about 2 passes, and if you look really close, there's a teeny tiny gap in some of these, and that's because 0.4 and 0.4 ends up to be 0.8. And the printer sees the outside edge is the most important, so sometimes it leaves a little bit of a gap. So when you're doing those really thin lines, you really start running the risk of having flimsy stamps and stuff like that. Some of the printers may be better, and there's probably some workarounds, and I actually have found some workarounds. But I know that if you chamfer the edges on this so that the stamp kind of looks like this, then I do end up with a cleaner line. I have gotten that down to about 0.4 millimeters on a chamfer, and still be 1 millimeter at the base, and then the top is about 0.4. Anytime you're starting to get that thin though, you can probably expect to wear out your stamps faster. That may or may not be a big deal. Frankly, a plate like this probably costs $1 to print in materials. So if you get 8 or 9 prints out of it or something, you have to print another one, it really doesn't matter. So but that's something to think about on your depth. I have been working on some other stuff. We're going to go actually stamp with these new designs. So I've gotten a lot fancier with this, and these actually do have some beveling and stuff on here. And as you can see, probably I don't know if you can tell, there's a glue line here. So I'm printing these, you can get big. So as long as you cut it into sections and have some sort of an alignment, like for instance, this piece of my pouch pattern, I had to cut this one piece into 3 to print it, and I just used a little triangular shape here on the cutout so that I could align it and glue it together flat. And yeah, I mean, it's just super glued together. It would break pretty easy, but we're not putting this through the stamp or anything. We're not, there's not a lot of pressure on this. This is just for tracing out. So all my patterns are digital. The best part about that is I can take this pattern, and this is what I use to trace around to cut my leather, and I know that this stamp plate is fixed perfectly to align with this with an offset. I put an offset on there of about 1 millimeter or so. That way, you know, when you're cutting that leather out, if you're cutting it by hand, I figure within 1 millimeter tolerance is pretty darn good. So, you know, if you're cutting it with a laser, you can cut your tolerances down a little bit. But anyways, and when I started doing this originally, I was tracing off some holes and punching holes and everything else, and I realized if I'm going to stamp it, you literally don't have to mark anything other than that outer edge, because the stamp can have all your holes. So this is a hole to punch, these are holes to punch, this is a line to cut. All of my internal markings and stuff can all be done on this stamp. So I have my design that's on here, as well as all the holes to punch. I have stitching lines, so I'll have actually deboss the leather and press it down so that I actually have grooves for my stitching and stuff to go on too. So anyway, so that's kind of how that's going. Maybe I'll kind of show a little graphic that kind of explains a little bit better on these prints on you know, the longevity and stuff of them. If you want to try to go taller, you can. Just remember that the deeper your embossing, the wider your line needs to be, or you have to figure out how to at least make the base where it's attaching to the base plate a little bit more supported, so that if it's very narrow, it's too easy to snap and break off. So that's one of the limitations. But honestly, I've got a 12-ton press that I'm using on this, and with the exception of the very first things that I tried to do, where I had very, very narrow lines and they were like 2 millimeters deep and they would snap off. Once I figured that out, I'm having excellent results with this. So why don't we slide on over to the other side of the shop here where my press is at, and I'll go ahead and emboss a couple for you with these 2 new patterns, show you how that works. Okay, so let's do the fun part first. This is the press setup that I've got going on. There's some improvements I want to do to it. I've already got this leather. I've already got it damp and ready to go, so it's ready to take the tooling. And as you can see, I've got that cut out pretty precise. So I've got this outer wall is just a little bit taller than the rest of the stamp. So what I can do is use that edge to get this all lined up in there. And I'm just using, so this is 2 pieces of 3/4 inch plywood. I do want to replace this with a steel plate at some point. I just haven't gotten a chance to do that yet. So I have that for the base. It actually works really well because it's only pressed on this one point here. So I'll slide this one in. And then to kind of help distribute the pressure, I've got this big block. This actually comes with the shop press. This is a 12-ton shop press. I believe it's from Harbor Freight. It's given to me. So anyways, we'll just crank this thing down. And I can put a lot of pressure on this. As you can see, I'm not, it's not doing anything funky. I'm not getting any breaks or anything. So what I'll do is I'll press that. So this is pretty much focused on that one front part. And I'll pull this back off here, and then what I'll do is I'll move the stamp to another section so that and you can already see that the stamp is pushing through. You can even see it on the back. So I'm going to go ahead and move this a little farther forward so I can get more pressure right in here. Okay, and then I want to do one more just back on this back side. These lines aren't nearly as important as the back side of the pouch. Just want to make sure that I can see my stitching grooves and stuff. I actually don't even have those going quite as deep. Alright, so we'll pull this off here. So as you can see, the design is actually pressing through enough that you can actually see on the back side of this. But there's no cracking or breaking on this stamp or anything, so that worked out really well. So we'll pull this off here. And as you can see, that turned out pretty good. My stamps I've got nice clean lines in that. When you have a big, wide, flat area that's going to impress, sometimes that's a little bit harder to get it in really deep. The lines on this is about I think it's 1.75 millimeters deep, because all of my lines are around 2 millimeters, 1.5 millimeters wide. So I was able to get that a little bit higher on all my design stamps so that I could try to impress that in as deep as I can. And, you know, for the most part, that worked really well. So I've got another one to stamp here. I'm going to do that real quick. I may just fast forward. It's pretty much the same process, but I'll go ahead and get that stamp done so I'll have it. Okay, that's looking pretty good too. The good thing about this is that, you know, if you kind of hold it in place and just pull one edge up, if you're not sure if your stamp design is getting in there enough, you can kind of pull it back and look at it and see if everything is going the way that you want. And if it is, you can pull it out. But if not, you know, everything is still perfectly lined up. So I can put this back in here and stamp, you know, put a little bit more pressure on here if I needed to. It's not going to cause any ghosting or anything. So that's what I like about doing the whole plate. So, and you know, when you're doing this on the computer, so I can take this same silhouette, cat silhouette, and you know, just copy that that line off of my sketch and put it on another product just as easy. Matter of fact, easier than I can, you know, print a stamp of just the one and then try to line it up exactly every time. So this way all my design elements are perfectly aligned, and I can always just copy and paste in the computer the design element and then print the entire design onto one stamp, that everything is perfectly aligned. And we know how it's going to look ahead of time before we even do the print. All our holes are marked out, our cut lines and stuff, our internal cut lines can be marked out. That's all done ahead of time. And I think that, for me, saves a lot of time. And I'm not, you know, I don't do a lot of hand tooling. So, you know, obviously you're not going to get the detail with this that you can get with, you know, the hand tooled products. It's a very different look. It's also a lot more expensive to do. As you can see, I can stamp one of these in a couple of minutes. To hand tool a design in here, to, you know, draw this out. And then go in and hand tool a bunch of detail. It would take several hours probably. I'm not an expert at hand tooling, but that really increases the cost of your product. So something like this, I know that I can finish this off as a pouch and I can sell this at a show, and you know, it'll sell at a reasonable price. And if it was hand tooled and stuff, you know, I'd have several $100s on it to cover all the labor. But just the stamp part of this, you know, a couple, 2 or 3 minutes, not including the time it takes to design it or the time it takes to print it and get it ready, but it's reproducible. So all of that design time and print time and stuff like that, that gets split up over the total number that you make. If you hand tool it, it takes that many hours every time you make one. So, I mean, like I said, it's up to you how you want to use it and what you use it for. But for me, I think that this is working really well. I think it's gonna add some value to my products without increasing the cost too much. Yeah, I'm really happy with this. So I hope that answers some questions that you had. Feel free to shoot me a message, or if you have a comment or something, you know, you can ask me there. I'll try to answer any questions you have about the details on how I'm doing this. This is just PLA. This is polylactic acid, simple. Matter of fact, I think the brand I'm using is Elegoo. It's somewhere around $10 or $12 a roll. So, you know, when I talk about the prices on this, that it's really inexpensive to print these. And I thought that I was going to have to go with a more expensive, you know, carbon fiber or ABS or something, a tougher filament in the end. But no, you know, as far as I've been able to tell, these have all, you know, I've printed several off of some of these others. The bracer design and stuff that I've done a couple of dozen on these, and I've not had any breaking or cracking or distortion or wear or anything. This is still going strong. So, you know, you can do the math yourself and see what you think. But for me, I think this is a totally viable option there, just sticking with PLA. You know, if you want to do it yourself and you want to use a tough one, maybe it'll balance out. You can get more out of it. I'm not a high volume person. So, but anyways, hope that answers some questions. Feel free to ask me some more or leave a comment or something. And I'll be posting some of these on Facebook. Let me post up a couple pictures here. I actually have a couple of these finished up. I'm going to actually do a dyeing video as well. So I'll let you kind of see how that goes. But anyways, thanks for watching, and we'll see you all on the next video.